At Amelia's funeral, the loyal dog named Rocky kept barking at her coffin. Rocky also constantly directed his attention to Amelia's father, the priest Samuel. This caused many people, especially Ethan, Amelia's close friend, to feel that something was unusual, and he was determined to uncover the truth behind it. Then a shocking secret was revealed, leaving everyone stunned. On a gloomy day, the sky was overcast, reflecting the deep sorrow of everyone present at the funeral. The air was heavy with loss. The attendees stood in silence, some holding handkerchiefs to wipe away their tears, while others were lost in thought, still unable to accept the reality. A gentle breeze passed through, rustling the leaves, as if nature itself was bidding farewell to a beautiful soul that had just left this world. Amelia, the young woman who was only 27, had passed away forever. As the daughter of the revered priest Samuel, she was known not only for her radiant beauty, but also for her kind heart. Amelia loved children, was close to the elderly, and always spread positive energy wherever she went. She was the pride of her father and the beloved of the entire town. However, in the past 2 months, no one had seen her around. Her familiar laughter gradually disappeared, replaced by hushed whispers of concern, with no one truly knowing what had happened. It wasn't until 2 days ago that Priest Samuel announced Amelia's death due to depression. This news shocked the whole town. People mourned for the fate of the young woman and were baffled as to why she had to face that pain alone. And today, everyone stood here, praying for Amelia's soul to be at peace. The funeral took place in a somber and dull atmosphere. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence. It was Rocky, Amelia's loyal dog, barking continuously. This was no ordinary dog. It had always been Amelia's inseparable companion, and now it stood before the coffin, staring at it, its barking growing louder and more urgent. People looked at each other with astonished and worried eyes. What could it see? They all wondered. Some began to feel fearful, but no one dared to take their eyes off the dog. Rocky's barking grew louder, as though the dog was trying to signal something important. Everyone knew that Rocky was highly intelligent and had a sensitivity that surpassed that of ordinary dogs. Its reputation wasn't just for loyalty, but also for its special ability to perceive things that humans couldn't. Some children, upon hearing the dog's bark, began to feel uneasy, recalling stories about dogs having the ability to sense strange things that people could not see. It seemed that Rocky was trying to convey an important message, and it surely knew something that no one else did. Its actions suggested that something was wrong in this place, right at this moment, but no one dared to ask. Priest Samuel, Amelia's father, stood there, his hands gripping the edge of his daughter's coffin, unable to stop crying for her. His eyes were filled with sorrow as he gazed at Amelia's face, but in the midst of his despair, he couldn't help but notice Rocky. Despite his heartbreak and grief, he shot the dog a sharp glance, trying to control himself. His mouth perpetually shouted loudly, "Rocky, enough! Stop now!" Yet Rocky's barking did not cease. It even echoed through the heavy air of the funeral, heightening the unease that enveloped everyone present. All eyes were now on the loyal dog, its barks tearing apart the silence of the ceremony, making the atmosphere even more oppressive. People looked at each other anxiously, unsure of what was happening, but the feeling that something was terribly wrong began to rise within them. Those standing close by began murmuring to one another, with suspicious and fearful glances exchanged between them. However, among the crowd, There was one person who could no longer remain calm. Ethan, Amelia's close friend, stood not far away, feeling an overwhelming sense of anxiety. He knew the special bond between Rocky and Amelia very well. This dog, always by her side, had been her most loyal companion throughout her life. So why, now that Amelia was gone, was Rocky reacting in such an odd way? The dog's gaze, fixed on the coffin, was not merely sorrowful. It seemed to be trying to communicate something important that no one else understood. Ethan felt an urgency, a strong compulsion rising within him. He decided he had to do something. Maybe the dog knows something we can't see, Ethan thought to himself. He couldn't just stand by and witness what was happening. Inside, there was a deep, nagging feeling that something was amiss, a hidden truth beneath the surface that he couldn't ignore. Ethan moved closer to Rocky, his gaze never leaving the dog. He bent down, trying to soothe it, but the dog continued to bark, not stopping for a moment. During this time, Ethan's attention wasn't solely focused on calming Rocky. He suddenly noticed that Priest Samuel was avoiding looking at the coffin, his gaze always averted, as if he feared facing something inside it. Could the priest know something that we don't? Ethan thought silently, and that was when he decided he could not wait any longer. Ethan approached Priest Samuel, who wore an expression of tension. Ethan asked, his voice low and filled with suspicion, "Can you tell me why the dog is reacting this way? Why won't it stop barking at the coffin?" The priest, still trying to maintain his composure, did not answer immediately. His eyes betrayed confusion, and sweat began to bead on his forehead. Not afraid of the priest's anger, Ethan pressed on. "Father Samuel, how exactly did Amelia die?" The church erupted in shocked whispers, with skeptical glances turning toward Ethan. Priest Samuel, his eyes wide, was clearly taken aback by this question. Ethan's inquiry was like a slap to the false tranquility, sending ripples of doubt through the air. "What do you mean, how did she die?" Father Samuel replied, his voice taking on a defensive tone. "I found her in bed. She passed away peacefully, asleep in her sleep," he repeated, almost as if trying to convince himself. But Ethan was not easily deterred. He took a step forward, his voice calm, but firm. "But why was Amelia alone? Why was it you who found her first? Doesn't that seem strange?" The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, the sense of unease and curiosity spreading throughout the church. The children exchanged confused looks, while the adults whispered among themselves, making the atmosphere even more tense. Oh, Father Samuel's face flushed red, his anger now fully exposed. He stomped his foot on the ground, causing the entire room to fall silent immediately. "This is nonsense," he shouted, his voice sharp as a knife. "You are disrupting a sacred moment, showing disrespect for Amelia, whom we all loved." A table of nines. With a cold, steely gaze, Father Samuel pointed at Ethan, his voice full of authority, but tinged with a hidden unease. "Leave immediately, along with this dog," he ordered. "We do not want to hear another word from you." Ethan and Rocky walked out of the church, each step firm, though the tension in the air remained. Ethan gripped Rocky's leash tightly, his hand clenched as if trying to suppress the anger rising within him. Their footsteps echoed on the cold stone floor, but no sound seemed to ease the strain of the recent confrontation. As they reached the door, Rocky suddenly stopped, turned and looked back at Father Sam Lee with a worried gaze. The dog may not fully understand everything, but it sensed the tension in the air. It tugged at the leash, as if calling out to Ethan, hoping he would understand and help it navigate the unease they both felt. The tug on the leash forced Ethan to move quicker, trying to maintain his calm. Ethan bent down, looking into Rocky's eyes, and in that moment, he felt a deep connection with the dog. It seemed as though Rocky was not just a loyal animal, but the only friend he could trust right now. The dog continued pulling on the leash, prompting Ethan to hurry, his unease and curiosity growing. "We have to go, Rocky," Ethan whispered, his voice low and decisive, yet tinged with an unspoken fear he could not conceal. Rocky, with bright eyes and determined actions, pulled the leash harder, leading Ethan to a small room in an abandoned church not far from there. This church had been neglected for years, its wooden doors old and covered in dust, as though time had forgotten this place. The atmosphere around it was gloomy, and no one dared approach the area. The cracks in the walls and broken windows only added to the eerie feeling, making it seem as though something was hidden in the darkness of the room. Rocky hesitated. Not at all, as if it knew exactly where to go, and Ethan followed, torn between fear and curiosity. He stopped in front of the old church door, where darkness lingered behind the cracks in the walls, faint light filtering through the gaps. Each step he took seemed to echo in the silence, as if everything around them was waiting for something. The decaying wooden door creaked loudly when Rocky pushed it open with its muzzle, revealing a dark and foreboding interior. The space beyond was pitch black, with only a faint glimmer of light coming from the broken windows. The smell of mold and dust filled Ethan's nostrils, making him feel like he had stepped into a forgotten place. The rotting wooden columns sank deep into the earth, creating a desolate, silent scene, as though time had stopped here long ago. Ethan felt a coldness rising from the depths of his heart, spreading throughout his body. Rocky entered naturally, as if there was nothing frightening about the place, but Ethan couldn't shake the eerie feeling. He looked around, trying to make sense of what was happening, but everything only confused him more. Another gust of wind howled through the crack in the door, creating a sound like the whisper of absent spirits. Ethan continued to follow Rocky, each step weighed down by a sense of unease. The abandoned church grew darker and more ominous as they ventured deeper inside. Rocky led Ethan down a long hallway where the damp walls were covered in cobwebs, and faint light from a cracked ceiling only added to the eerie atmosphere. Ethan's rapid breathing blended with the howling wind through the crevices, creating a suffocating atmosphere. At the end of the hall, Rocky stopped in front of an old wooden door, most of which had rotted away, but it was still tightly shut. The dog turned back to look at Ethan, its gaze urging him on, and despite his fear, he couldn't stop. Ethan held his breath, slowly pushing the door open. The creak of the hinges echoed eerily in the stillness. Inside, the small room was pitch black, except for the dim light coming from a hole in the roof. And then, Ethan froze when he saw a gaunt, emaciated figure bound tightly to an old wooden chair. "Amelia!" Ethan gasped in horror as he recognized the girl. She was still alive, but her frail body, hollowed face, and eyes filled with terror and pain were a shocking sight. Rocky rushed to Amelia, whimpering as though it had been waiting for this moment for all this time. Ethan quickly ran to her, using the small knife in his pocket to cut the ropes binding her. Amelia weakly looked up at Ethan, tears streaming down her face. Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse from thirst and exhaustion. Ethan helped her stand, but before they could leave, she clutched his hand tightly. "You need to know the truth," Amelia said, her voice trembling but determined. Amelia began to speak, her words like knives tearing apart the dark secret. She revealed that her father, Father Samuel, who was respected by the entire community, was actually a criminal. He had embezzled donations from the congregation for years. When Amelia discovered this and urged him to stop, he dismissed her advice. Unable to watch him continue his wrongdoing, Amelia decided to gather evidence and report him to the police. However, when she was about to carry out her plan, her father found out. Instead of listening, he imprisoned her here, in this abandoned church, for 2 months. To cover up his crime, he fabricated a story that she had died peacefully in her sleep and held a fake funeral, hoping to make everyone believe she was gone. Ethan stood still, everything collapsing in his mind. The reverence he once had for Father Samuel was now replaced with disgust and outrage. "We need to get out of here now," he said, his voice full of resolve. "And Amelia, I promise, we will bring everything to light." Rocky barked loudly, as if agreeing, and the three of them left the dark room, carrying with them the horrifying secret they had just uncovered. Suddenly, the rotting wooden door suddenly flung open with a loud noise, echoing through the abandoned church. Ethan jumped and turned around, and before him stood Father Samuel. His face was cold, his bloodshot eyes filled with fury, and he gripped a large wooden staff tightly. "You think you can leave here with the truth?" His voice was low, yet menacing. Without waiting for Ethan to respond, Samuel charged at him with terrifying speed, swinging the staff towards him. Ethan barely had time to duck as the staff swung past his head, making a loud crack as it hit the wall behind him. Amelia weakly screamed, and Rocky growled, baring its teeth in a threatening manner, but too scared to attack due to the disparity in strength. "Ethan, run!" Amelia screamed in panic, but Ethan stood his ground in front of her, his gaze determined. "No, I won't let him hurt you anymore," Ethan shouted. Samuel responded with another swing of the staff, this time aimed straight at his chest. Ethan skillfully dodged, but the force of Samuel's blow was so powerful that it caused Ethan to stagger and lose his balance. "Wait, are you doing this?" Ethan yelled, trying to regain his footing while glaring at Samuel with fury. "For honor? For fear of being exposed? She's your daughter." Samuel growled, his eyes flashing with a moment of pain. But then he swung the stick again, this time aiming straight for Ethan's leg. The powerful blow made Ethan collapse to his knees, one leg trembling from the pain. Rocky charged forward like an arrow, growling fiercely before sinking his teeth into Samuel's leg. The sudden and forceful bite made Samuel scream in pain, staggering back. Samuel struggled, raising the stick high with all his might and striking it hard across Rocky's back. A sharp crack echoed through the room, causing the loyal dog to howl in agony, releasing Samuel's leg and collapsing to the floor. Rocky lay there, trembling, letting out weak whimpers, struggling to lift his head, but unable to. "Rocky!" Ethan screamed in panic, his eyes filled with both rage and concern. He rushed forward to protect the dog, but Samuel turned, raising the stick again, his eyes wild. "You will not destroy everything I've built," Samuel shouted, his voice full of desperation and fury. Ethan stood in front of Amelia, arms raised, his gaze unwavering despite his heart pounding in his chest. "You can't win, Samuel," he said firmly. "The truth will be exposed no matter what you do." Samuel staggered forward, but Rocky, though in pain, tried with his last ounce of strength to rise. his eyes blazing with determination to protect Ethan and Amelia to the very end. The loyal dog attempted to growl, though his voice was weak, standing between Ethan and the attacker like a living shield. Amelia, tears streaming down her face, looked at Rocky with sorrow and regret. "Dad, please stop," she cried out, her voice echoing through the cold room. "We don't have to do this. I'm your daughter," she screamed, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I don't want to do this, but I can't let you keep ruining more lives." Samuel, hearing his daughter's voice, hesitated for a moment, just enough for Ethan to snatch the stick from his hand and throw it aside. Rocky stood firm in front of Samuel, growling non-stop, while Ethan caught his breath. "This ends here," he said, his voice stern. "You can't hide the truth forever." Seizing the moment of Samuel's uncertainty, Ethan swiftly lunged from behind, twisting Samuel's arm to force the stick to fall to the ground. Samuel screamed and struggled, but Ethan locked his hold on him. With surprising strength and skill, Ethan pulled out the handcuffs from his pocket and quickly cuffed Samuel. Ethan dragged Samuel out of the dark room, the faint daylight streaming in through the door, casting a stark contrast with the gloom of the abandoned church inside. Rocky, though injured, struggled to follow, his loyal eyes never leaving Ethan and Amelia. Once outside, Ethan didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone and quickly dialed 911. "I need the police and an ambulance. Right away. I've apprehended a suspect at an abandoned church, and there is a victim in need of help," he said quickly but clearly, his eyes still watching Samuel, ensuring he didn't attempt to escape. Finally, the truth was revealed to the light. Father Samuel was led away by the police, his face grim, but no longer carrying the usual arrogance. His crimes, from embezzling donation funds to imprisoning his own daughter, could no longer be concealed. A heavy sentence awaited him. Amelia, though still weak, was taken to the hospital for treatment and recovery. The horrifying days had finally ended. She decided to start over, leaving behind the heavy shadows of the past. After her recovery, she moved to a small, peaceful town where no one knew her painful story. Rocky, the brave dog who protected Amelia and Ethan, never left her side. In their new home, Amelia and Rocky found the peace they both deserved. They began a new life, free from dark secrets or lingering fears, with only love and gratitude for having gone through everything together. This story offers a profound lesson on courage and perseverance in seeking and protecting the truth, even when it means facing fear and danger. Ethan proved that sometimes, to stand up against injustice, we must step outside of our own safety zones and trust our instincts and the people who stand by us, even if it's just a loyal dog like Rocky. Amelia is a testament to the strength of determination and hope. Though imprisoned and wounded, she never gave up her will to fight against wrongs, defending the moral values she believed in. The story also reminds us that power and prestige do not equate to morality. Father Samuel, once revered, used his position to hide his wrongdoings. However, the truth can never be buried forever. It will always find a way to rise when there are people brave enough to expose it. Thorn sent some to earth after he forbade a hire, and his converts were unjustified. In the end, Rocky's love and loyalty serve as a reminder that sometimes the smallest and seemingly simplest things have extraordinary power to change our lives, bringing hope and healing.